everybody. My name is Reverend Pamela Dawn. I am a PhD student at Pacifica Graduate Institute, getting my PhD in Jungian psychology. I'm also a professor at the University of Redlands. So, I have been working on a project for my dissertation that will address the concept of individuation, which I'm not going to go into right now. However, part of it will also have a lot to do with eco-psychology and getting back in touch with the earth, which at this point seems to be of the utmost importance. So before finishing my dissertation and launching the program that I'm creating as a result of that, I knew that this was the exact right moment in time for me to present the information that I will be accumulating and producing as part of my dissertation. So this is going to be a 5-part series. I'm breaking it up into little chunks because otherwise it will get a little confusing. I want to give you some background in this first one. This is pretty much an introduction, an explanation, and a definition of terms, so that as I talk later on in this series that it'll make more sense. I'm going to start it off with a absolutely amazing quote by Gustav Jung, who is the psychologist that I study, and I'm going to call this series Earth Allies because that's the name of the process in my dissertation. All right, so it'll all make sense as we move forward. Here's this really great quote. In fact, it seemed to me that the high mountains, the rivers, lakes, trees, flowers, and animals far better exemplified the essence of God than did man, with his ridiculous clothes, their meanness, vanity, and abhorrent egotism. Yeah. And as we are in the throes of a major worldwide pandemic where there are people both helping others and just being completely abominable, I think that that quote is pretty poignant right now. So let me give you a little background. So after the birth of my child, I had such horrible postpartum depression that I almost threw myself out of a window. One day, plagued with sadness, I sat down in my office to do an active imagination, which I'll explain more later. But imagine like a guided meditation without the guided part, in the hopes that something would save me from the downward spiral that I was experiencing. In that session, I saw a vision of a map, which I then drew. Following that, I had another session where I saw the image of tarot-like cards with the images of Persephone and Medusa on them. I then created that art. Continuing visions propelled me towards the production of an engaging adventure-style logbook and map book process that is accompanied by an actual map, spinner like you would get on a board game, oracle deck and compendium. Mythic Mapping, which is the name of my dissertation and you're going to hear a lot about over the next couple of months, was born, and I discovered that it was actually a creative game-like system to track the individuation process. My dissertation will be the text that explains how the system is used, reflecting on the process by which it was created and how it accesses specific Jungian theories. All right, so that's the overview. What we're dealing with is just one little part of that. So as I started to work more and more with the map, I realized that each island on that map were all different parts of an individuation-like journey And individuation, which I'll explain here in a second in more depth, is about becoming who you were sent here to be. So one of those particular islands named itself Home and Place. All right, I said, to the strange map that started talking to me in my unconscious meditations. So shortly after I created this map and heard the name of this particular island, they all have names, but I'm not going to go into those right now. I attended a workshop at Esalen with the mythologist Sharon Blackie. She discussed the fact that she felt like the world really needs new myths, and she suggested a process by which one should go out into nature and see what parts of the landscape or animals they were attracted to, and then determine what stories they had to share. So when I heard that from her, I went, oh my goodness, this is the type of thing that I've been trying to tap into for a large majority of my life. I have a women's group that I lead every full moon, and over time it's kind of, I've attempted to get us more and more focused locally and less utilizing the myths of other cultures or from perhaps where we came from, because guess what, people, those myths don't apply anymore, not in the ways that we would religiously. They might apply from a psychological standpoint that are really good examples of parts of our psyche, but to tap into those spiritually just didn't feel right to me anymore. So this Home and Place island suddenly made more sense. So in the mythic mapping process, or in this process that I'm going to be encouraging you to do over the next couple of months, which we're just going to call Earth Allies, it's based in Jung's theories on archetypes and the individuation process. Earth allies themselves are plants, animals, minerals, stones, or any part of the landscape on which a person lives, on which you live. Not somebody else, not like a cool tree you saw on vacation, the trees that are in your neighborhood, the plants that are in your neighborhood, the stones that are in your neighborhood, the animals that are in your neighborhood, because as you live in a particular place, you are actually part of that landscape. I hope that makes sense. And as a result of that, all of those things are reflections of your psyche. Likewise, that squirrel, you're part of a reflection of its psyche. I don't know exactly how that works, but for the squirrel, but for you, if you're really attracted to squirrels and you have a lot of tree squirrels like we do here in the mountains, perhaps you are really good at gathering resources and playing and storing things away, and they're just so fun, being fun, so I hope it'll make more sense as we go, but I hope the seeds are starting to be planted. So my main objective for this particular video is just to give you a definition of terms. I don't want it to be like I'm just downloading all this stuff at you, because that doesn't seem fair. Okay, so the first one is individuation. Let's make that a little bit more clear. Individuation has to do with becoming aligned with an internal guiding and ordering archetype that Carl Gustav Jung called the self, capital S. The understanding of individuation that I bring to this project is that it is not about becoming a more socially acceptable person or rich and famous, but rather about comprehending and utilizing the forces that make us who we are. It is the act of transforming into who you were meant to become. According to the online journal Psyche, in the broadest possible way, individuation can be defined as the achievement of self-actualization through a process of integrating the conscious and the unconscious. This Earth Allies piece is an attempt to incorporate the unconscious. Jung had an idea of the collective unconscious, where all of the archetypal energies that are part of everything kind of live in this soup that's kind of beyond our knowing. The major part of individuation work is accepting that one has an unconscious that contributes to the psychic life of the individual. This is where there's a lot of splits in psychology. Jung believed in the unconscious. This is like imperative. It's something that influences your mind and the way it works that you have not a direct access to. So the integration of the conscious and unconscious can be done through things like working with an analyst. A lot of people don't have money to do that, and right now in this major crisis, it's really our responsibility to start doing this work. So what the process I'm going to start offering you is a way to pursue that actualization over the course of years and months, by way of monthly active imagination work. All right, that's a word. Active imagination. It's actually two. What does it mean? Okay, so Jung began his work in analytical psychology around the same time as the famous Sigmund Freud. I'm sure you've all heard of him. So Jung then became a valued student and friend of Freud. However, Jung eventually broke from his mentor due to a difference in opinion around the implications of the sexual drive to psychological development and mental issues. So he was like, yeah, no, it's not all about sex. So after this breakup, Jung had a bit of a nervous breakdown. During this time, he found himself triggered when he thought about playing the building games he did as a child. So he decided there had to be some way for him to develop a relationship with that inner child who revealed himself, and thus active imagination was conceived. Active imagination is like meditation plus engaging with the fantasies that well up from the unconscious. So instead of most of us know meditation as don't think or focus on a mantra or something like that. It's none of that. It is being in that meditative state, and then when something trickles up, like suddenly you see an image from a dream that you had, it's engaging with that. What I'm going to suggest that we do is pick something ahead of time and then engage with it. So by doing this with his inner child figure, Jung was able to unravel important details regarding his psyche and began to interact with other images as well. Jung himself states that active imagination means, quote, that the images have a life of their own and that the symbolic events develop according to their own logic, if your conscious reason does not interfere. So what's really important as we move forward into this work is not forcing something. So, for instance, when I was talking about squirrel a second ago, if I had kept really trying to say what squirrel was about, that would be my conscious mind trying to interfere with that image instead of just thinking of squirrel and waiting for the information to unfold on its own naturally. He explains that the beginning of this process starts by imagining a specific mental picture. That image will then begin to shift and change. If one cooperates with the unconscious and does not force things with the conscious mind, the image will tell a story. All right. Last term. Archetypes. People are using this like crazy. I'm going to give you from the horse's mouth on what it actually means. So as part of Jung's ontology is the fact the unconscious exists on both a personal and collective level. This view must be taken into account while considering this term. So imagine that at a collective level, there are basic instinctual patterns of behavior, emotion, and imagery that are common to all humans, called archetypes, which guide and give meaning to our interactions with other people in the world. Some examples of these are the concept of mother and father, wise man and child. They can be looked at as templates of human experience. Jung has innumerable explanations of this concept, but one of them is that archetypes are, quote, deposits of constantly repeated experiences of humanity. The archetype is a readiness to produce over and over again the same or similar mythic ideas. Thus, these blueprints of psychic reality also provide the source material for mythology. Lionel Corbett explained, he's an amazing Pacifica professor, quote, the archetypes are not only numinous manifestations of the divine, they also play a part in the organizations of personality. So they create the myths that we believe in or have as our story, and they also create the personality that makes you up. So we can also apply this to how we look at the earth and the energies and stories they present. And that's what we're going to be doing. So this is part 1 of a 5-part series. I will be going into how we got to the ecological, psychological disaster that we're in right now, in one brief little and then the depth psychological response to that. So how depth psychology, which is where Jungian psychology falls, how it responds to this ecological crisis. That's going to be video 2. Then I'm going to give you a brief little tutorial on how to just immediately start working with some of these energies by working with a stone ally. I have worked with stones my whole life. I do believe that they have their own resonance and they have their own energy and they have an ability to help us heal and ground and focus. So I'm going to recommend a process by which you can go outside right now, pick one up and start working with it to help ground you during this process. I straight up sleep with this stone. I am constantly holding it. I'm constantly just trying to feel grounded because everything is so topsy-turvy right now. So that'll be the 3rd video. In the 4th video, I'm going to explain the full moon work that is actually part of the Mythic Mapping process, but you can do on your own or you can join in. I might have an open full moons ritual for everybody to participate in. I already do it with a group of local women, but I might expand that outwards, especially if you tell me that you're interested. And then in the 5th journey, I'm going to explain more about Carl Gustav Jung and his connection to this work that I'm doing right now. So hopefully this will bring you some peace, a way for you to connect to the land that is immediately around you, because if we do not start doing that now, we're lost. So I look forward to seeing you here again. I'm going to try to do these every day, but it really depends on my schedule and my son and just life and how it's unfolding. So the next full moon is actually on Tuesday, so I don't think you're gonna get that information before then, but we can be in dialogue about this. Please feel free to give me your comments, give me your feedback, and tell me how you're doing. All right, sending love and grounding out to everyone on the planet today.